730 children. 730 children. Over 4,000 Palestinians have been forced from their homes and lands. Armed settler violence has surged, and entire villages have been displaced. And in Jerusalem, a flagrant violations of the historical and legal status quo at Muslim and Christian holy sites continue unabated under the protection and encouragement of members of the Israeli government. To be clear, this is in the West Bank, not Gaza. Almost 42,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th. So is it any wonder that many are questioning how can this war not be perceived as deliberately targeting the Palestinians? The level of civilian suffering cannot be written off as unavoidable collateral. I grew up a soldier in a region that is all too familiar with conflict. But there is nothing familiar about this war and the violence unleashed since October 7th. In the absence of global accountability, repeated horrors are normalized, threatening to create a future where anything is permitted, anywhere in the world. Is that what we want? Now is the time to ensure the protection of the Palestinian people. It is the moral duty of this international community to establish a protection mechanism for them across the occupied territories. This will guarantee the safety of Palestinians and Israelis from extremists who are taking our region to the brink of an all-out war. That includes those who continue to propagate the idea of Jordan as an alternative homeland. So let me be very, very clear. That will never happen. We will never accept the forced displacement of Palestinians, which is a war crime. No country in the region benefits from escalation. We have seen that clearly in the dangerous developments in Lebanon over the past few days. This has to stop. For years, the Arab world has extended a hand to Israel through the Arab Peace Initiative, offering full recognition and normalization in exchange for peace. But consecutive Israeli governments, emboldened by years of impunity, have rejected peace and chosen confrontation instead. Impunity gathers force. Left unchecked, it gains momentum. Palestinians have borne more than 57 years of occupation and oppression. During this time, the Israeli government has been allowed to cross one red line after another. But now, Israel's decades-long impunity is becoming its own worst enemy, and the consequences are everywhere. The Israeli government has been accused of genocide at the ICJ. Expressions of outrage at its conduct are echoing around the world. Cities everywhere have seen mass protests, and calls for sanctions are growing louder. International frustration with Israel has long been mounting, but it has never been more exposed. For decades, Israel has projected itself as a thriving Western-style democracy in the Middle East. But the brutality of the war on Gaza has forced the world to look closer. Now many see Israel through the eyes of its victims. And the contradiction, the paradox, over and over we have watched Israel try to achieve Your Excellencies, the world is watching, and history will judge us by the courage we show. And it is not just the future that will hold us accountable, so will the people of the here and now. They or will fight to uphold the principles that anchor this institution and our world. Right now, they are asking whether we will stand by as parents watch their children waste away, as doctors watch their patients die for lack of basic medical supplies, and as more innocent lives are lost because the world failed to act. This war must end. Hostages and detainees must return home. But every day we wait is one day too long for far too many. So I call on all countries to join Jordan in enforcing an international Gaza humanitarian gateway, a massive relief effort to deliver food, clean water, medicine, and other vital supplies to those in desperate need. Because humanitarian aid should never be a tool of war. Whatever our politics, one truth is undeniable. No people should have to endure such unprecedented suffering, abandoned and alone. We cannot surrender the future to those who thrive on division and conflict. I urge all nations of conscience to unite with Jordan in the critical weeks ahead on this mission. Almost a year into this war, our world has failed politically, But our humanity must not fail the people of Gaza any longer. Echoing the words of my father from 64 years ago at the 15th session of the General Assembly, I pray that this community of nations may have the courage to decide wisely and fearlessly, and will act with urgent resolve that this crisis and our conscience demand. My father was a man who fought for peace to the very end. And like him, I refuse to leave my children or your children a future we have given up on. Thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
La Asamblea escuchará.
The Assembly will now hear an address by the President of my country, the Republic of Guatemala, His Excellency, Mr. Cesar Bernardo Arevalo de Leon. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly, and this is a very special honor for me.
Excelentísima
Your Excellency Carlos Rodriguez, Vice President of the 79th session of the General Assembly. His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen.
Uwashri Uwashuleu.
The people of Guatemala greet the world. I greeted you in the language of the Quiche people, one of the ancestral and most influential communities of Guatemala. Their power and that of the various peoples of Guatemala is what sustains our government. It is the strength of our country. It is the resounding voice of those that have not been heard, of those that have been marginalized, but who have a lot to say, a lot to contribute, who have a place to play in building our collective future. I'm here as a result of two clear expressions of popular will. The first, a vote which unanimously rejected the representatives of the authoritarian past of Guatemala, and it granted me the honor of the presidency to lead the national effort to move towards a future of justice, equality, and progress. The second was the defense that the society of Guatemala, by various means of expression, reaffirmed and defended on the streets with regard to the decision that they took at the polls when a corrupt minority attempted to impose their further rule and cheat democracy. Our democracy will not be complete, it could not exist, without the impetus which is so decisive and courageous of the Mayan people of Guatemala, of people of mixed descent, of the Garinagu people of the Caribbean and of the Xinca people. It is a democracy that comes from the four corners of the country, from these four peoples. Together we form a nation. And the role of our government is to give a sense of unity to this diversity and to move forwards towards a prosperous and inclusive future. I would like to express particular thanks on the part of Guatemala to the countries, peoples, and governments that were together with us, together with the people of Guatemala, during this historic gesture in 2023 and for the support that they continue to give us in our efforts to rescue our democratic institutions. And we are doing this through dialogue, a dialogue which is part of a great national consensus, something which all Guatemalans share over and above our ideological differences, our cultural diversity, our various ways of seeing the world. And I am sure that in this forum everyone can identify with this consensus. Namely, we cannot continue to tolerate corruption. Corruption, when the few abuse what belongs to everyone to benefit themselves, is like an anchor that chains us to the past, and it prevents us from growing, from prospering and building a society which is based on the common good. In the case of Guatemala, corruption's roots are buried in our authoritarian past of repression, of political violence, of social exclusion. But we are breaking free from this. We are freeing ourselves from the chains of the dark past, and what we are seeing reborn is a young, creative, vital, joyous but anxious nation. Young people who will not be silent in the light of injustices and in the light of corruption. A diverse community that is building the future, a future where everyone has a seat at the table, where opportunities multiply, where cooperation and solidarity optimize talent, creativity, and individual efforts, where parents are able to sleep peacefully knowing that health and educational opportunities for their children will be guaranteed, where work will be fairly remunerated, and where prosperity will not require immoral acts of corruption, where the earth, our earth, will be treated with gratitude and respect, and it will give us in exchange clean spaces for us to work, to live, to recreate ourselves, to grow. This is the future that we are building for Guatemala. And this future is not emerging in a vacuum. For us, we see it as coming from within, from our principles, from our own values, from our own cosmovision. Our government is made up of the diverse peoples of Guatemala, and these are the values and the vision of these four peoples. They are the instruments that we are using to navigate this ocean of transformation. In the same way, this very important forum, and so necessary for global coexistence and for the progress of all nations, must look inwards and return to its fundamental values and use them to navigate the complex reality that we are facing today as a planet. The time has come to rescue multilateralism, to revitalize dialogue for peace, and to take concrete actions in order to resolve the most urgent problems afflicting us.